The last item we're going to cover is the subassembly parts report. I'm trying to be clear about this so you can understand why I'd have this report. In some circumstances, if you're a person that is buying or your company is buying subassemblies and assembling, and let's use the yacht as the example, the 47-footer, the cabin cruiser. If you're just buying the components and not assembling them and you're just installing them, you would have this level of the report would probably cover most of your needs. But if you are also constructing subassemblies and then installing them, then you're going to need the subassembly parts report. In the actual drawing subassembly screen, you had the ability to bring down the top level item, the main assembly, the subassembly, and then you actually added the component materials and parts that make up that item. If in the process of doing your manufacturing or doing your construction, you do not have to assemble subassemblies, then this report would not be needed or information would not be added to it. But if you're a manufacturer and you're building the subassemblies, then this report would be key to you. What it basically does, it takes the individual subassembly tasks that you're working with, and it takes the subassembly, if it has parts that go into the subassembly, it's going to identify them, and it's going to make an individual record for each one of those items and how those items are used. And there's a narrative field in the materials and components screen under the subassemblies to describe that process of the assembly, to include at the subassembly level either drawings or pictures that you're taking of the process that's involved with actually adding or installing. In the case of this, we're going to have a fuel tank assembly that we're putting in, and there are parts that go into it. There's the actual mounts and then the bolts that are attaching the mounts and the fuel tank down to the actual major assembly, which is the top level assembly, which is the yacht hull. So what you're doing is you're taking these items, if you're going to be assembling them, and then the parts that are required to install them into the yacht, and you're itemizing each one within the subassembly drawing screen. Then what happens, this report breaks it back out again and shows you the individual tasks that you're going to be doing at the subassembly level to include whatever it takes. Like if I'm doing the fuel or engine mounts or whatever it may be, for example, this is the fuel tank, and then I'm going to be adding the bolts that mount the fuel tank, and then I'm going to cost out each one of those items and summarize them in a report. So what you would do in this report is to take and optimize the report by doing the omission of certain things that are not going to be a part of the task that you're going to do. And the way you do that is just to go down and look through the items. And in this particular case, you'll see that there are some items that are not required as far as breaking them down. In this one, I'm going to omit this record because it was for a different project or group, and it's not a part of the whole subassembly that we're working with. So in this case, we have the fuel tank mounts, we have the engine mount bolts, we have the engine mounts themselves, we have the ballast tank mount, we have bolts for the attachment of the fuel tank. So these are the items that are going to be assembling into the hull. And if you take this at the parts level of the items that are needed, these are the things that would be those items below the subassembly that would be a part of the actual manufacture of the yacht that we're building. Now I've only put samples, a few samples of these. Obviously, you'd be aware that this 47-foot yacht is going to have a lot of things going into it. As we said before on the last thing when we were talking about the subassembly parts themselves, the actual assemblies, the breakdown to the assembly level costed it in one way, and then this screen would do the additional costing of the bits and pieces that are required in order to do the final assembly at the component and materials level. When I say component and materials level, it might include things like hoses, clamps, other subparts that go into the manufacture of, say, for example, assembling the engine within the engine bay. you would have things that actually go to the hull, like the radiator and whatever. They have to be attached by certain different devices that would be listed appropriately for maybe the engine installation drawing set. So it's a matter of you understanding your own drawings and then breaking them down in cost-wise. And now this goes back to what we discussed in the subassembly drawings report, that the items that need to be omitted or not costed when you're doing a billing might be specifically to how much of the product that you have to deliver. Let's say, for example, there's a reason to replace a radiator. You could pull the radiator and all the parts that are taken to assemble the radiator in the hull and do a separate report for those items, and then come up with a summary cost at the bottom of the list that tells you what the cost is to do that process. Now, that's an example. It could be many different other examples where, for example, you are assembling the entire engine, and that's a part or a separate process that you're going to do, and you're at that level of manufacture where you have to do that. Then you would have a subassembly called engine block, and maybe you would have a subassembly for the heads on the engine and maybe for the carburation. So those would be subassemblies that you break out the cost of individually and then show the assembly parts that are required in order to accomplish that subassembly construction up to the subassembly item. Hopefully I didn't run that into the ground, but you at least understand the basics of how this report is vital if you're doing construction to the subassembly level and the attaching parts that construct between each one of the items in this case, the yacht hull. If you need additional assistance and understanding of how you can make your drawing package work to be optimized in this report, give me a call or chat with me online, and we can go ahead and cover those issues. Thank you.